sci-fi this weekend, I've been mopping up some of the remaining Oscar contenders for 2024, and one of those was Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2, the second half of his adaptation of Frank Herbert's 1965 science fiction epic about the war over the planet Arrakis, the source of the fabled spice, which allows interstellar travel. And with the surviving heir to the House Atreides having escaped into the wilderness and been taken in by the native Fremen, House Harkonnen is ruling the planet with an iron fist and is determined to stamp out any opposition while the Emperor of the Universe watches and the Bene Gesserit nuns see their plans for a new Messiah seemingly fall apart. Previously adapted, of course, by David Lynch in 1984, that film massively condensed down the story into an hour and 2 hours and 20 minutes. But it had a style, it had a vision, it had an energy to it that this does not even consider. I found it to be absolutely crushingly dull, slow, ponderous. I made notes. I rarely make notes for these reviews because it's much easier just to talk off the top of my head. But I was so unimpressed by this. I had to watch it in 3 separate sittings. I found it stiff, starchy, and sterile, ponderous and pretentious, boringly literal-minded. The lack of any kind of visual flair or style or anything at all to keep me interested was staggering. It's protracted and unimaginative with no sense of it being set 8,000 years in the future or on an unimaginable alien world. Dialogue sounds like it's written for American characters rather than, as I say, an alien planet 8,000 years in the future. Characters sound like they would today. There is no thought given into how people would talk, how people would converse, how, just slight changes in idiom. It's terrible. The casting is leaden and lumpen. Zendaya as the female lead is a bad actor. She has no chemistry with anyone. She has no chemistry with Timothée Chalamet, who's the notional lead and her notional love interest. She's very, very boring to watch. The casting of Christopher Walken as the Emperor of the Universe, I thought, was crashingly obvious because he's an elder statesman and he's a cult figure. Of course, you're going to cast him as the Emperor of the Universe because you have no imagination. I think casting an actor like Dick Van Dyke would have been far more interesting because he's someone who has weight and age and carries a certain legacy in a way that Christopher Walken doesn't. I think that would be far more interesting, someone like that. The film is a transcription as simplistic and artless as the early Harry Potter films. It really reminded me of the first 2 Chris Columbus films where they are just transcribing the books from page to screen with very little thought to artistry or embellishment or filmmaking skill. Villeneuve is just a bad writer who doesn't know it. And the result is just a very flat, bland transcription of the book. Far too long, far too self-involved, really lacking any purchase upon which the imagination can grab. It's just dull and artless, and this is supposed to be one of the greatest science fiction films of all time. It's not even one of the best science fiction films I saw this week. Godzilla and Kong the New Empire was better than this. It's really dismally poor. It's one of the worst films I've seen this year. It's crashingly dull. It turns the prospect of a jihad against the universe into something I can't wait to be over so I can go to bed. It's terrible. I don't understand what it is people like about it, and I'm not interested in finding out.